What is going on, guys? Welcome on back to Second and Short. I am Tyler Lauder. He is Aaron Ben, and we are back to talk about a tight end, a position that we haven't talked about for several weeks. I mean, I feel like, was it Greg Olsen was the last tight end we talked about?
Yeah, I think it was Greg Olsen with the Seahawks.
I feel like it feels like a month ago.
It feels like ages.
You know, we're going to talk about a younger guy. Speaking of ages, a younger tight end.
A bit younger, yeah.
That's Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron, had this prolific draft profile coming out of college, out of North Carolina, where he's supposed to be this all-elite athlete. And his career at the Lions was so-so. But he had a resurgence with the Colts, and now he gets Big Ben. He's had actually a really good career of quarterbacks so far. But let's dive into that background. Aaron, why don't you just kind of bring it all together?
Well, yeah, Eric Ebron is this kind of like second. He's part of the succession of the Lions choosing tight ends high in the first round. He was drafted 10th overall in the first round out of North Carolina. He competed in his rookie year, competed for playing time with Brandon Pettigrew and Joseph Faria. Pettigrew was also a first-round pick by the Lions at tight end in the first round. And he ended up finishing the season with just 7 starts, 25 catches, 248 yards, and a touchdown. Nothing really to write home about, but tight end is kind of notoriously hard to break into like your rookie year. It takes a while to kind of get into the swing of things. He ended up playing 4 years in Detroit. Never really lived up to that first-round hype. He went over 700 yards once in those first 4 years. And it was nothing like really special. They didn't keep him on in Detroit after that. 2018, signed a 2-year deal with the Colts, had this kind of a quote-unquote breakout year with just about 750 yards, had 13 touchdowns, which was his big stat there. That was tied for second in the league among all players. And that was when he made his only career Pro Bowl. I was playing with Andrew Luck, had a lot of good chemistry with Luck, had a lot of good catches in the red zone. And they're actually a very good duo, him and Jack Doyle, for the Indianapolis Colts for last year and the year before that. 2019, he kind of regressed a bit again, finished with under 400 yards receiving, and then he was placed on injury reserve after just 11 games. So that's kind of his career up to now.
Now, when we look at his career, there's obviously things that kind of stand out. Like you talked about with the Detroit Lions, he only went over 700 yards once, but the downfall to that is he only had 1 touchdown that season. Career-wise, though, he's pretty consistent on what he does, and that means like what I'm talking about is like his catch percentage is always around that like 60% with an outlier here or there. His depth of yards per target is around 7 yards, and so like things like that. That's to me that's really good. His average yards per reception is about 10 to 11 yards. It's just kind of consistent. So like, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah. It's not like you're not going to be surprised by what you get with him. Like you're just going to, like what he's done throughout his career is, like you said, pretty consistent, and what you see is what you get.
Yeah. And last year, if we were doing this series with the Pittsburgh Steelers, we would have been talking about, Minka Fitzpatrick and how big of a move that his impact was going to be for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that showed. And Ebron here is going to come in and he's going to be able to work with Vance McDonald in like 2 tight end sets. But let's, before we keep going on how well he's going to like work with this team, Aaron, give us the full contract right here. And it's not much, but just what you got.
Yeah, nothing really special. 2-year deal, $12 million, $3.5 million in 2020, and then $8.5 next year. And you can be cut after this year for just $2.5 million dead cap.
I mean, average wise, that's about. I mean, if you break it in half, that's $6 million a year. Obviously, with 3.5 this year, that's a very team friendly deal for the first year. And if he plays well, then he'll get that bump. What do you look at? Like when you see this contract, what do you think? Is it fair?
I think it is really a pretty cheap deal for a tight end who I think they're counting on him to come in and be the starting tight end. maybe split most of his time, like you said, with Vance McDonald. But I think it kind of is like you usually say that 1 year deals are kind of prove it deals. I think it's a 2 year deal, but I think this is kind of the same idea. Like he's playing for cheap this year, and if he proves himself, he'll get that $8.5 million in 2021.
During the 2020 season, he's only going to be 27 years old with 6 years of experience under his belt, which is pretty legit. And he's going to bring this credibility that the Steelers need at the receiving core ever since they've lost, their two best receivers in Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. Now, let's just jump into this scheme fit and how well he's going to fit in with this offense.
Although he never lived up to his draft position, he has proved to be a pretty capable receiving tight end. And what they've brought him in to do is be a big target in the red zone. In 2018, Vance McDonald had this kind of sort of breakout year for the Steelers. He had 600 yards, 4 touchdowns. I thought he was kind of going to be the guy in 2019. And you remember that game against the Bucs in 2018 when he stiff-armed, who was it, Chris Conte?
He stiff-armed him into the graveyard, like he buried him.
Yeah. But then kind of McDonald regressed in 2019. You can kind of blame the quarterback play because they had Big Ben was hurt. You had Mason Rudolph and a guy named Duck throwing passes. And your receivers were Juju, a young Deontay Johnson, and that's
James Washington.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, the offense hasn't looked the same since they lost Bell and Mr. Big Chest. Definitely, they need someone to reliably catch passes in the red zone. I think that's what Eric Ebron was brought in to do. Steelers, they were last. They were dead last in the league in red zone scoring last season after being first in 2018. So that kind of tells you a lot because 2018 is when they didn't have Le'Veon Bell, but they had Vance McDonald was playing well. They had Antonio Brown at his peak, like at his prime. And so they, like Juju also went over 1,000 yards that season. And then last year just kind of fell off a cliff.
For really what it is it's the quarterback play. Honestly is what it is because Big Ben is a Hall of Fame quarterback and Mason Rudolph is a guy that defenders want to smack in the head with their helmets. Like that's the difference right there.
He does kind of have a smackable face if you look at him.
I mean, he looks like the type of guy that would say something smug to a defensive lineman, but we're not here to talk about Mason Rudolph's cushion. Now, Eric Ebron is going to have a huge impact on this offense, and he's going to be able to increase their red zone efficiency, which is obviously going to get them out of this 8-8 area they're in right now. What he also brings here is that he's actually he's an above average run blocker, which is a really awesome thing when you think about how everybody profiles and talks about Ebron. Really, it's just he's athletic. He's a receiving tight end. He's a red zone threat. But he's actually efficient in the run game. And that's something that the Steelers want to get back. They want to get the wheels turning on the ground to allow Big Ben to not have to drop back as much. And if Big Ben doesn't have to drop back as much, he stays healthy, he can play a whole season. They're a playoff contending team.
Yeah, I feel like with Big Ben, they're always going to be a playoff contending team.
And if Big Ben's healthy and Ebron's helping in the red zone with him and he's helping in the run game with James Conner, and I mean, realistically, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they could put anybody behind that line and they're going to find a way to work. Now, let's talk about his impact, and not just like the impact that he's going to have on the field, but like the impact that them signing him made, because there are other tight ends this offseason that were trading teams. I mean, we saw Greg Olsen go to Seattle, like Tyler Eifert left. There's just lots of movement going on for some of these mid-tier tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh didn't really have a lot of cap space coming into this offseason, and so this was kind of a relatively cheap option for them. I think they felt like even though they didn't have a lot of cap space, they needed a boost to their receiving core, whether that's a tight end, wide receiver, or running back. So they went with Ebron, who, like we said, has been proven to be this guy who can catch the ball, score touchdowns. And this is a pretty cheap deal, especially considering that Tyler Eifert just signed a 2-year deal with the Jags for $15.5 million. And so these are two like tight ends who had this kind of pre-draft hype that really haven't panned out the way you'd like to. Eifert got $15.5 million, and then they signed Ebron for just $12 million. So
what's interesting about that is that whenever I think about like Eifert compared to Ebron, is I just think of like an injury-plagued tight end.
Exactly.
But he got more money, and like Greg Olsen is getting more money, even though it's a 1-year deal. He's getting more money in that year than Ebron's going to get this year, and he's 35. You know, he's 8 years older than Ebron, and so like things like that. It's just the Pittsburgh Steelers got a very good deal here, and I think it's a good deal for Ebron too because it guarantees that if he has a good prove it year, that he automatically gets like a $5 million boost, which is a positive thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think after the 2018 season, at least I remember a lot of people were kind of really high on Ebron because he had so many touchdowns, and people forgot that like he had a pretty high drop rate. You said before, I think his career is like a 60% catch rate, which is not great for a tight end.
I mean, no, in that 2018 season, he had like 113 targets, but only caught like 65 balls.
Yeah, and people forget that Jack Doyle was actually, by most measurements, was the better tight end on that team. And then last year, Ebron kind of regressed a little bit, and kind of people remembered who he was. So I think if he would have been a free agent after that 2018 season, I think he probably would have made a good deal more than he is now.
But we also have to remember, though, he was dealing with injuries in 2019. Jacoby Brissett was his quarterback, who is now a backup again. And so it just kind of shows that if he is on a team that has a good offensive line, a capable quarterback, and a solid run game, that he can be that good option to get you, 10, 11 yards, to get those first downs, which he has a decent first down rate too. And he's also going to get touchdowns. And I think with the Steelers here, I can tell you right now, he's going to get more than 5 touchdowns. I just think I could see him at about 6, 7 touchdowns. And with most of those being just in the red zone. But he's still athletic enough to, move out into the slot and play up against some of these small corners and just beast them.
Well, and if you look over his career, he averages about 9 air yards per target, which means he's getting the ball 9 yards down the field average per target compared to Vance McDonald's career average of just 5 yards down the field per target. So that also gives you an idea of what Ebron gives you in that aspect.
100%. And I think what's going to be interesting here is if this Ebron move works, the Chase Claypool draft pick will be looked at more as a wide receiver. But if Ebron falters and McDonald doesn't, improve, then he might get moved over to tight end. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how they're going to deal with that, because I know a lot of people are saying that Claypool could play tight end because he's athletic enough, but he's also got the beefy size too. But I think, honestly, with Ebron McDonald there, it's going to allow them to not have to draft a tight end for, a year, maybe 2. But let's think about this. Pittsburgh Steelers have Big Ben healthy. James Conner is running the ball well because Ebron's blocking. Ebron is getting a couple touchdowns in the red zone. They're moving from 32nd in red zone touchdowns to even 25th. Like, that's a 7-spot move, which is like an increase of probably like 6 or 7 red zone touchdowns. That's it. If that thing happens there, do you see this this something minor, this signing, propelling this team to the next level? Like, if those things happen?
Well, yeah, I think if their red zone offense improves, that definitely is something that'll lift them up. Especially if you consider that last year, even without Big Ben, they still were like the 7th seed in the AFC. If they had moved to the 14 team playoff schedule that they're doing this year, if they had done that last year, the Steelers would have been in the playoffs. So just like that little boost in the red zone, that could have made all the difference, and that can only help them this year, I think.
So let's move into predictions. Eric Ebron, this is, it's an offensive player, so these are very easy. But let's let's go around his average, which is about 550 if you take everything. Do you think that he will get over or under 550 yards receiving with this team?
I think it'll be close. I can see him getting just a bit over, like between 550 and 600, because I think he'll be sharing passes with Vance McDonald. And I mean, they're going to have Chase Claypool. I think he'll have a decent rookie season. They have Juju, who may bounce back from kind of a below average year last year. So I think he's not going to get a whole lot of chances. So I could see him getting just around that number, like between 550 and 600.
And I think that's still a win because we see that Vance McDonald, getting over 600 was like a highlight. And he only got like 4 touchdowns in 2018. And so if Ebron can replicate that, that's really all the Steelers need. They just need a guy to come in and get about 50 to 60 catches and get about 600 to 700 yards and about 6 to 8 touchdowns. That's really what they need at the tight end position. Realistically, even with Big Ben, they cannot be 32nd in red zone scoring, like touchdowns, and be looked at as a contender in the AFC. That number has to improve.
Yeah, exactly. What about touchdowns? Do you think he gets over or under 7 touchdowns?
See, I want to say that's exactly the line, which is why this is tricky. But I'm gonna go with under to be correct. But I realistically think that it could be over. Like if I was putting money down, I would say under because I think the line would be 7, and I think anywhere from 6 to 8 touchdowns is a good expectation for him, pending health.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he got 10 touchdowns. I think they're going to look for him in the red zone like a lot.
I mean, Big Ben rewards guys that make big plays, the guys that will like go out and make and like pad his stats for him. That's just what it is. Like he used to give Antonio Brown like 10 plus targets every single game because what does he do? He gets the ball into space and he creates and he helps make Big Ben look good. So if Big Ben and Ebron have this connection early, it could be very dangerous for the AFC North because the AFC North has a lot of question marks or like asterisks at linebacker. And what I mean by that is, the Ravens just drafted 2 middle linebackers. The Cleveland Browns just lost 2 of their 3 starting linebackers. The Cincinnati Bengals are on a defensive retool, right now rebuilding. So Ebron is going to have a good opportunity against some like new blood in these organizations to work against some of these linebackers that are going to try and cover him. And anytime he's in the slot, those nickel corners, he's going to be able to manhandle as well.
Yeah, I think he has the opportunity to come in here and kind of help out the organization in the red zone. And I think they're not going to regret signing him, especially at the price that they signed him.
Let's go with games played. Do you think he will play over 12 games?
Yeah, I think he manages to stay healthy. It's hard to predict injuries, but I think he'll be able to stay on the field.
Alrighty. Well, that is going to do it for us here at Second and Short. Thank you guys for tuning on into this AFC North New Edition episode of Eric Ebron going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you guys like our content here, please subscribe down below. Let us know that you're enjoying the content we're putting out and that we should keep pushing and putting this out. Also, be on the lookout this week for some polls on Twitter as we are about to start a new series here in about a couple weeks. And we kind of want to get some fan input on what type of series we should go with as we have a couple different ideas. Aaron, where else can they check us out?
You can check us out on Facebook for all you old heads out there. We'll be posting every episode on Facebook. We also got Instagram going with a new post almost every day. news updates, discussion points, things like that. I like to kind of upload stuff to the story if there's like last minute news flashes and things like that, polls. And we're also on Twitter, where we, like Tyler said, we'll be posting polls and stuff like that on Twitter. So hit us up, send us a DM on whichever platform you like, and we look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good night.